We're going to call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please note those in attendance?
Be noted.
Thank you. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Item 2A, minutes of the regular city council meeting on January 28, 2025. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Item 3, adoption of the agenda. We have one addition. We're going to add an item 8B, which is the police sergeant's union agreement. If there are no other changes or corrections, amendments to the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Item 5, visitors and presentations. We have the Community Development Biannual Report. Mr. Lindahl, when you're ready.
Mayor, members of the City Council. So tonight is the Community Development Biannual Report, and so there's twice a year we check in with the City Council and report back on activities in the Community Development Department. So in August, I believe, you saw the first half of the year, and now what we've done annually is in January, or now in February, I guess, here, we present to you the full activity report for the last year. So just as a way of, way of reminder, the primary duties of the Community Development Department include long-range planning, short-range planning, different special projects, zoning administration, housing work, economic development, and then the building department includes the plan review, inspections, rental inspections, and code enforcement. Some of the bigger projects the community development, or excuse me, the council may remember community development working on in 2024, including the updates to the city's zoning regulations related to cannabis uses, or new cannabis regulations from the state. The county roadie branding and marketing strategy, assisting the engineering department with the downtown mobility study, and then of course a lot of our time has been spent on the update of the zoning code, which is an ongoing project. Looking first at information from the building division, again, by way of background, the building department reviews building permits and does inspections related to those permits. Just small side note, much like cities across the state of our size, we do contract our electrical inspections out as a special service. But otherwise, we do all commercial, residential, and institutional construction projects review and inspections in both White Bear Lake and Matamidi. And so, sorry, typo here, that should be 2024. The department reviewed 3,537 permits with a valuation of just over $110 million and $1.2 million in permit fees. What you see here on this slide, you might remember from last year as well, shows an overall trend line of building permit activity in the building division. Since 2010, what you see here, a couple notable things is, we certainly saw a spike in, an upward trend in 2021 and 2022 with the school district's projects throughout the community, not to mention just, the North Campus, but then the projects throughout the community. And then the Lochner residential development also accounted for a lot of this activity. What you'll see here, I think, in the next couple slides I show you is, while we had a spike a few years ago and we are seeing, a return, a little bit of a downward trend, but a return to more of what you see as kind of the normal level of activity over the long term before this. So, and as I mentioned before, the valuations correspondingly show a downward trend related to the number of permits also being down, but you also see, I believe that that's leveling out to the area that was more of the traditional levels of the past. Moving on to code enforcement, you'll see again here the trend line of cases through the last several years. We average over 2019, 2024, just under 600 cases, code enforcement cases a year. Last year, we were, in 2023, we were closer to that 600 level. We're down to about 500, I think, in 23. We'll see here in a second on the slide. So we're down a little bit this year, but again, in line with the levels that we've seen in the past several years. Just as a summary, you can kind of see the percentage of activities related to code enforcement. You may remember in the halfway through the year, we reported that our code enforcement issues were up, especially this year because of the wet spring that we had. So they represented a larger proportion than in past years. Usually the largest proportion is in that refuse and exterior storage category. We also just show you, just as a kind of a point of reference here, the distribution of code enforcement cases across the city and based on the 5 wards throughout the community. Generally, they're pretty evenly distributed. This particular year, there was a slightly higher rate in Ward 3. Moving on to planning department activities, again, you see recent activity levels here. What jumps out on this slide is 2020. What you'd see, the reason for that is it's COVID related. What you'll see here in a second is a lot of the activity that happened in the planning department slowed down, even though there were still some projects and building permit activity going on. But generally in 2024, we're in the kind of normal range for the past several years. So the biggest category in the planning department is this questions and inquiries. So that's phone calls, meetings, talking with people about different projects and things that they're doing. And that, again, kind of coming back to that 2020 year with COVID is when those conversations, that biggest level activity really dropped off. Taking a look at more specifically for the data for 2024, you'll see this distributed about the number of cases that we have. We had 724 in the first half of the year, down slightly 681 in the second half of the year overall, but cases are trending in kind of the normal level for the past several years. That really summarizes the data from the Community Development Department, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Lindahl. Sounds like even though things are down, you're staying busy and there's a lot going on as usual. Council, any questions for Mr. Lindahl? All right. Thank you very much. All right, item 5B, Sports Center Annual Report. Mr. Juba.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Good evening. Tonight we have the annual Sports Center report for you. 2024 was another solid year of operations at the Sports Center. Sports Center is the proud home of White Bear Lake Area High School girls hockey, the White Bear Lake Area Hockey Association, the city's Learn to Skate program, and figure skating program. 2024 event highlights include three spring ice shows, which were very well attended. I think I attended the Friday night show. They usually do a Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee. They're really fun if you've never experienced one, so I'd encourage you to attend. 2025, just a quick plug, the dates for those shows are April 25th through the 27th, and the theme is Blades on Broadway, so should be a fun one. Other events in 2024 were the Winter Holiday Show, the 31st Annual Skating Competition, 10 high school girls games, nearly 100 youth games and scrimmages, and 9 youth tournaments, which if you've ever been through there on a weekend during a youth tournament is a very busy place, brings a lot of activity to the area. And then, of course, there's countless hours of practice, training, things going on at that facility leading up to all of those events. Maintenance-wise in 2024 was a bit different year than we've experienced lately just because we removed the ice sheet for the first time since the renovation. So that used to be an annual thing. When the equipment was really old and things were failing, we'd have to tear out the ice, do all the necessary repairs, check everything, and then reinstall it. That usually takes place in May. And we hadn't done that since, hadn't had to do it since the remodel in 2018, and some power outages really is what led to that. Was obviously when the power goes out and it's harder to maintain that sheet. So there was enough degradation that they decided to do that last year, and that was successful. Also now the solar array that's on the Sports Center, if you recall, had some installation issues, so it went up, came back down, but has now been fully operational for quite some time. Has resulted in over $23,000 in energy savings since that's been up and operational. So that's good to see. New improvements you can see on the pictures here. These are kind of fun things that wall of recognition for the figure skaters, and that's a partnership project with the parents of the figure skating folks, celebrating their involvement at the Sports Center. And just to note, we have 3 skaters from our figure skating program that skate for Disney on Ice and tour all over the world to do that. So that's a fun point of pride for the figure skating program. And then also the Wall of Tradition, which was put up this year by the Hockey Association, celebrating just their heritage and a lot of the players that have gone on to do big things in the hockey program. And then on the revenue side, just for operations, very much business as usual in 2024. There's an uptick in the skate school program, which is notable, and then a continued reduction in the revenue from Live Barn. And Live Barn was peaked during the pandemic, and that's the streaming service that's installed at the rink, so people can subscribe to that and watch games from anywhere. And obviously that was a big deal when nobody could go anywhere, and it still generates significant revenue, but not nearly what it did during those challenging times during the pandemic. So outside of those 2 things, everything else was fairly consistent on the revenue side, and obviously we'll get a full picture of the financials, including the expenditures, when the audit is done here in the near future. So that's what I have for you for a report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Juba. Do you recall what the total cost of the solar panels were, that project?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I do not recall, just because that was part of the larger project that had a lot of different components throughout the city.
Okay. No worries. All right. Council, any questions? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Juba, at various times, though not recently, we've had conversation about how our sports center generates off-site revenue for the city, for businesses in the city. We bring in a lot of guests and visitors. Some have to travel a distance, stay overnight, et cetera. I'm not expecting that you have this on the top of your head, but if you have any insight, or have there been any conversations in the past year about, do we have any sense of what that larger impact is? Who feels it, that kind of stuff?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Edberg. Good question. I do not have that off the top of my head.
Didn't expect it.
But there, I think depending on where you're at, it's quite evident, obviously, right in that area. If you swing by Carboni's, for example, even just during a weeknight, I think they feel the impact of all the activity that's going on there. It would be interesting to try and start to quantify foot traffic to begin with, and then kind of build that discussion out from there.
It's not a mandatory part. You and Mr. Bates and the whole staff have lots of other things to do, but that might be an interesting, there's an ROI conversation in there somewhere about, we have paid to invest, to maintain the facility. We've had other partners do it. Are we getting what we thought we would? Are we getting more? Whatever. And I'd welcome whatever thinking you can do over time, and we can check in at some point in time.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right, Mr. Juba, thank you for the report. Item 6, public hearings. We have nothing scheduled. Item 7, unfinished business, nothing scheduled. Item 8A, concept plan review for 2263 3rd Street. Mr. Lindahl.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The item before you tonight is a concept plan review. And just by way of background, concept plan reviews are really a discussion and feedback item. They're designed for the applicant to have the opportunity to go directly to a neighborhood meeting, the planning commission, and the city council to get general feedback on their application, or their proposal, I should say. As part of this process, they, like any other application, they have meetings with staff to go over the zoning standards and how their project fits in or doesn't fit in with those standards. And then based on the anticipated review process that could take place for the project, there are certain categories that are required to go through the concept plan review process. In this case, the anticipated next step in the review process for this proposal would be a plan unit development. And so those applications are required to take this initial first step to have this concept plan review to comment and discussion. So the subject property is at 2263 3rd Street. It's the EMIS Church. They're proposing a 3,300 square foot addition to the property, which really basically doubles the size of the footprint of the existing church. This would it would include increasing the capacity to 300 seats from around 200 right now. The analysis, the report that's on your desk goes through the typical review standards that would be part of an actual application, and gives you the information related to those and how it meets or doesn't meet the standards related to the zoning that it's in. But it doesn't include a recommendation. Again, this is really just a discussion and feedback kind of application. But that analysis does identify 3 areas where this application doesn't meet the city standards. So the first is in the interior side yard setback, or with this property located in a corner has one neighbor to its west. And so that would be 20 feet, and the applicant is, the concept plan proposes 10. The height of the church is listed on here, but is conforming with that. The second area that's a challenge for this application is the parking requirements. The applicant would be required to have 102 stalls based on the proposed addition to and seating capacity of the addition to the main sanctuary, and is proposing 0 as part of their application. And then lot coverage in this area, because it is in the shoreland area, would be limited to 30%, and with the addition, they're up to 40.2%. And just again, as a point of reference in the history of the church, in 1986, the church was issued a conditional use permit for the property, or for the districts that it's in, and went also at that point through a variance process for a parking reduction at that time as well. So the neighborhood meeting took place on January 16th at the church. As part of neighborhood meetings, these are hosted by the applicant. Staff attends to just provide process answers to any questions, but really it's the applicant's meeting to have a conversation with the neighbors. Approximately 15 people attended that meeting, and concerns were raised about the parking, potential noise and lighting issues, impervious surface coverage, and just the overall intensification of the site. Then this concept plan went to the Planning Commission back on January 27th. The notification for that is it's not a public hearing, so the city didn't send out notification, but that invitation to the neighborhood meeting listed both the Planning Commission meeting and the City Council meetings, and then those dates were reiterated to the people in attendance at the neighborhood meeting. We had 5 attendees at the Planning Commission meeting. 3 were church members that also live in White Bear Lake and stated their general support for the project. There were 2 attendees that were generally opposed to the project for similar issues that were related or brought up during the neighborhood meeting, and they were neighbors to the church site. Overall, the Planning Commission, I would say, had a general desire to support the church and the fact that it wants to invest in the community, but did have concerns that it may be just too much for the site that they have to work with. The lack of parking raised a significant challenge and impact to the surrounding neighborhood. And generally, they recommended considering some redesigns that could lessen the impact on the neighborhood. As I mentioned, we look at the potential review process for a concept plan, and that outlines, again, the 3-step discussion process, the neighborhood meeting, the Planning Commission discussion, and then now review and consideration and comment from the City Council tonight. In the future, really the only path forward for this particular application would be to consider a plan unit development. The plan unit development, again, the council may remember, allows for flexibility under for some of the zoning standards in exchange. Again, the intention is that there'll be an exchange to get a higher quality development. And the applicant is really, it's really on the applicant to detail how they intend to provide that higher quality development. So kind of reaching to our typical last slide in the presentation, which includes, that would include a staff recommendation. Again, as a concept plan, we don't offer a particular recommendation at this stage. We just really wanted to note the 3 issues raised initially here in the analysis relate to a reduction in setback, a reduction in impervious, or an increase in impervious surface coverage, and then basically a waiver of the off-street parking standards and moving that need for this site to accommodate into the public right-of-way and the city's neighboring public surface lot. So really, the key questions for the council to consider as part of their discussion tonight would be, should the city consider the use of a PUD to allow deviations from that side yard setback, impervious surface, and or the off-street parking requirements? And if you think a PUD could be used for those things, how should the applicant consider revising their application to offer a higher quality development in exchange for that PUD? Or is there something in particular the council would be looking for? Just a note in your packet, there's a few things that staff typically lists as part of an exchange for a PUD, generalized categories. None of them fit very well with this particular application. The other thing is that generally staff tries to discuss things the applicant could offer that generally relate to the deviations and addressing those issues as they come along. It's not always a perfect fit, but it's a good place to start. And again, we, in conversations with the applicant, we were struggling a little bit as to find connections as to how they could address parking, for example. So with that, I take questions from the City Council.
Mr. Lindahl, point of clarification, your staff recommendation is take public comment. Are you saying at some point later on the process or tonight?
The intention generally for concept plans is that the council does take comment during the meeting.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned, we did receive one additional public comment. I'm sorry, I'm glad you mentioned this, Mayor, that was distributed on your seats tonight. That was from one additional neighbor just down the street at 2040 3rd Street, Bruce Shea. I'll let you know, Mr. Shea has about a page long of comments here. I would summarize it to say, much like the Planning Commission, I think Mr. Shea acknowledges churches as an important community use. and that generally he feels that they think they've been a good neighbor, but he raises several concerns about the intensification for the site and that they just may be at a point where they're beyond the capacity of they've reached the capacity of the activities the site can accommodate. So again, I'm sorry, with that I take questions.
Thank you. Okay, well, there was a gentleman that talked to me before the meeting, and I said we weren't going to do public comment because I was not aware that we'd done that in the past, but we will do that. So anyone who would like to speak to this issue is welcome to come forward at this time. And if you could please state your name and address for the record, even if we know who you are, that'd be helpful.
Name's Ed Cox. I live at 2258 3rd Street, so I'm directly across from the church. I'm a local builder in town, so I do a lot of remodeling downtown, so I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm up on all the zoning, but I know a little bit about it. And so I've lived there for 8 years. My parents lived on Stewart and Lake Avenue since '87. I didn't grow up in that house, but I hung out there a lot. And the church has been there, obviously, forever. And when it was running prior to the current group having it, it's pretty low impact on the neighborhood. You really didn't know what was going on. You know, they had a few gatherings and a few cars parked and things like that with pretty low impact on the neighborhood. And then it went up for sale, and these guys acquired it, and pretty much kind of the same thing for a while. And over the last year and a half, you can see that the more pressure on the neighborhood. Me being directly across the street, my Sundays are kind of designed around their activities. Me getting out of my driveway with my boat maybe, me inviting people over, nowhere to park for my group, just the general activity. And then it's been increasingly more in the evenings. You know, we've been seeing more and more cars parked there for whatever's going on, I don't know. But you know, there's an incredible amount of pressure, as you guys know, because you're studying it with the downtown area and the parking and everything that happens, and the spillover into the neighborhood. Now, I knew I moved downtown and I moved next to the neighborhood. But it's not been like this where it's like every day, you know. And I look at this, you know, as a builder, I look at this, even though it's a church and churches are important in the community for people, it's a commercial operation. It has to meet this remodel. They'll have to meet all the ADA laws. They'll have to meet all the lighting plans. They'll have to deal with all their external HVAC. All those different things all impact the neighborhood, and they will be very impactful, some of them. The fact that it's taking up twice the amount of space on their property as they currently take up, so it's going to be a relatively large building on a small residential area. It's getting to be to the point where it's a growing, wonderful business, and it needs to go find more space, you know. And they're in the residential area 100%, so that, you know, and we've done a pretty good job of stopping the commercial and not allowing it to affect the area downtown, and this has. Now, if you read Bruce's letter, a lot of that, Bruce and I are neighbors, and I've talked to him a lot about this. I've also talked to a former client who lives on 4th Street that couldn't make it tonight, and the Coopers, and they're on board with Bruce's letter and the things that he put in that. And my concern is that if we add 300 more seats, allow them to build it, they're getting rid of the minuscule amount of parking they have right now, 12, 14 cars or whatever it is. So they're going to 0, which whenever I apply for a commercial job or something like that, parking's critical, and we're battling, you know, parking in all kinds of communities, not just White Bear. And that usually is the driver of what happens with the business. So, you know, we're gonna, if they never grow anymore, that would be great. But their church's main reason, you know, is to grow, most churches, I guess. And what are we gonna do when they come back in again and ask for something more? I mean, we were kind of tapped out. And there's a new build, and they're here and they'll probably speak, but there's a new build going in. There's people that are investing a substantial amount of money to the tax base of downtown. I do that on a regular basis down there, and to have this be towering over them, next to them, is really gonna change what they're doing to their house. So it's affecting a lot of people, all the way around it, and some of them will speak, but, I think we need to look at the rules that we have in place, the zoning we have in place. It's all there. It's all important. It's all the rules of staff and everybody put together, and it's worked well for me, all the zoning stuff and all the rules. I follow them all the time and try not to come in for variance and do that stuff, and I think that's hats off to the staff for having a decent amount of flexibility, but this one seems to be over the top. Plus, when they bought the place, they were already under a conditional use permit, and now we're gonna stack another one on top of it. And I think that starts to get a little redundant. So I appreciate your guys' time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Scott Buss, live at 2255 3rd Street. So my wife Stephanie and I just bought that house and moved in, or took possession in August, and we've been remodeling it. So certainly the reputation of the church coming in has been that they were a good neighbor, and that took that into calculus as we moved in, and so happy to have them as a neighbor. And but the concerns with the proposed expansion and the proposed concept that they've shared is, you know, the size of it and the location, which being referred to as the side yard setback. So me being immediately west to it, we would feel that. So the current proposal there have a 10-foot setback instead of what should be 20 feet is what I understand, I think is what code would allow for. So, and also considering with the drawing they have, it's a large flat wall, potentially 30, 35 feet high at its highest point, you know, right up immediately against my yard line. So that's a concern visually for sight lines and a change, but along with the size of that and the proximity comes light pollution, which today isn't really an issue, noise from additional mechanicals, right? It's a bigger structure, it's gonna require more air handling, et cetera. And then rainwater management, because that size of that structure and its shift over, again, to the west, lot line towards me now, there's a potential rainwater issue or something that has to be mitigated that I don't want to have to, you know, encounter and deal with on my side of the yard. So hopefully we can take those things into account as you consider what's appropriate for this area and residential area. And just an additional note, I appreciate the process that the city's put forth and the chance that the church had to share their concept publicly and go through these steps. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Boyer, representing 2263 3rd Street. I'm the senior pastor at that church, and I do just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to talk. When you have a chance to speak back, really invite your bluntness toward us. This process, as Mr. Lindahl explained, is to offer us some help. We are open to changing our drawings and reconsidering what might work if you see a way forward for this. I do want to address a few misconceptions or misrepresentations that have been shared at prior meetings or even already tonight, just to help clarify a few things. So the first comment is that this building, if mapped out to what we've proposed and drawn, it would become something like an eyesore in the city or in the neighborhood. It would be unseemly for the space. This, if we expanded it in such a way, would put the building at about 7,000 square feet, which is larger than it is now, but we would still be one of the smallest church buildings in all of White Bear Lake, just to give that a little bit of context. Even walking around the Lake Street, the neighborhood, I mean, there are single-family homes that are bigger than this. So it would not be a monstrosity by any means. A second misconception, just somewhat unhelpful, this showed up in Mr. Shea's letter, but it's shown up elsewhere, is this comparison with us and Eagle Brook. I mean, nothing against Eagle Brook, but I just want to be very clear. We are not Eagle Brook. We have no intention of being Eagle Brook. And even if we wanted to be, it's unlikely we could. There are so few churches that see what they've seen. A more helpful comparison is a neighborhood church like St. John of the Wilderness, or just down the street, First Presbyterian Church, a neighborhood church that does good in the neighborhood, has been around, relies on some street parking, and yet have been good neighbors for a long time. The mental connection to Eagle Brook, I think, is something of fear-mongering. You're going to have this massive, massive church in a neighborhood. That's by no means our plan or stated goal. So I want to be clear with that. Also stated in Mr. Shea's letter and elsewhere is the issue of parking. We totally understand that this is a big ask. We are not foolish here. We understand that we are in need of approvals from you all. And yet at the same time, to make the assumption that this would be Market Fest 2.0 every Sunday is rather ludicrous. The drawing as is, I think Ed misspoke, and I think you know you misspoke, not intentionally, just accidentally, that we would be adding about 70 seats to the sanctuary. So not 300 new seats. It'd be bringing us to 300 total, which would, with the loss of the parking lot, add approximately 40 to 45 more cars that would need street parking every Sunday. To my understanding, there's about 1,500 cars that come and park down here every Thursday for Market Fest. Again, we're talking about 45 cars additional to the street. So 4 digits versus 2 digits. The 45 cars, I'm not pretending that's small, but within about a 2-block walking radius, there's about 400 spots available, including street parking and city lots. So there are places for these cars to park. The last misconception that I want to address, and I think this is the most important one, is the comparison that we are a business and that you all should be thinking about this proposal the same way you would be a Papa John's or a boutique shop coming downtown. We are not a business in that same way. Last year, I had 3 members of our church express with me deep suicidal thoughts that are recurring. I met with them regularly throughout the year. I offered counseling that would have cost them tens of thousands of dollars if they went to a private firm for counseling. The church received from them $0 and 0 cents. Similarly, we had about 24 folks that pastors of the church met with on a regular basis, dealing with severe depression, anxiety, and addiction. These meetings, these counseling, this care that took place, I mean, this would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars if done at a practice. Again, the financial benefit to the church was $0 and 0 cents. We are not a business, and you guys have a hard job. Thank you for doing it. You have hard decisions to make. You have to take into account so many different needs, and I'm understanding of that. You have to think about taxable income. You have to think about the budget. You have to think about zoning. And yet, it is also your responsibility, the responsibility of the city to consider the needs of its citizens. And I just encourage you, as you consider this proposal, even at this stage of it, consider the needs of those who are suffering. Consider the emotional needs, not just the economic needs of the people here. Again, I'm understanding that this is a big ask. So we're very open to hearing your guys' thoughts and recommendations for how this plan might be able to work for the city with changes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
My name is Jay Rendell. I live on 4740 Stewart Avenue, right across the street on the east side of the church. And like others have said, we have gotten along well with the church. We don't have any problem with them. But there are several issues with this that I'm concerned about, and I think other neighbors that aren't here because they're skiing in Colorado or somewhere might have too. But also I want to mention, I do think this is a good idea for you to have these hearings before things get rolling, and then there's investment in drawings and everything that are detailed, and so I think that's good. I was on the Planning Commission decades ago, and so I understand how this all works. I guess one of the main points I wanted to make is that there are ordinances that are there, and they're there for a reason. And I think the city should follow those. And I'm disappointed when I see things where the city might be trying to, that's why I'm glad we got to talk today before you discuss this. Consider a PUD. Well, I don't know why the PUD thing comes up. You know, what's in the shoreline district? It's can only have a certain level of impervious surface. And those things are set by state law, and they should be followed. We're just watching all of the shoreline around the lake just get consumed in development. And it's little bit, little bit, little bit. And so I think those things are important, and I hope that you'll follow the code and we won't have to get into issues about that. It seems to me like this is a little bit like trying to fit a big round peg in a small square hole. And, you know, it's not that big a lot, and when you saw the picture of how much bigger it's going to be and go all the way over 10 feet to the new neighbors, it would create a wall for me looking out to the west. You know, the sunset will be a thing of the past. The wind, other things, everything gets affected. And we've had it going around on the east side of me. There's a huge house there now, and it just goes from one end to the other. And I think we need to keep things small. This is the old downtown or old White Bear Lake residential area. And, you know, I just think that it's not appropriate. There is a solution, which some people might like and some might not, but they have one service a week. One. How many churches have one service? All they need to do if they want 300 people is have 2 services and don't have to spend all the money and ruin our views and affect our properties. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue?
My name is Bon Somerville, and I live next to Eddie and across from you guys, which, nice to meet you. And I just want to say, as a Christian, I love the idea of a church there. I think they've done a nice job making it very presentable. They have a bench, they have a little library thinger. But I do agree with Jay that have 2 services if you need to expand your the number of people that you want to attend your church. And I think I paid a ton of money to do the pervious impervious rigmarole. When we built our house, it cost us well over $30,000 to do what the city wanted. And so I believe that that should be respected, that people have abided by the city and paid money to make it proper. And as far as parking goes, I think that if you have a church, you have to have parking. So, and I know their parking lot is very small, but it still covers 10, 12, I don't know, cars. And that's 10, 12 cars that don't have to be on our street during the service or hopefully services. So that's just what I want to say, because they've been good neighbors, I have to say. They've been very lovely neighbors. One thing is the kids do run around a lot, And I'm a little, my neighbor, one of my neighbors who's not here, but they're concerned that the kids might run in the street when they're pulling out of their driveway or whatever. But other than that, they've been good neighbors, but I don't think they have to have, they could definitely do 2 services or whatever. And since we did our part to do what was required by the city, I think the church should have to do that as well, even though I think they're good neighbors. So, anyway.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Hipkins. I'm at 1875 Orchard Lane, and I am the chair of the Elder Council at Emmaus Church. So, yeah, as everyone has said, very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you and eager to hear any feedback that you're willing to offer. Couple of points of clarification that go to maybe some unique elements of the way we do things at Emmaus Church. And obviously, we don't need to get into into too much detail, but it does bear on a few of the comments that have been made. When we formed the church and when we gathered as a group of Christians, it was our stated goal at the time to meet all together each week, and when we meet together and we worship together and we partake in communion together, we do that as a family meeting and a family meal. And yes, it's a common thing to have multiple services, but it's been really important to us, and I think will continue to be really important to us that we stick with one service. And so that's why multiple services would solve some problems, but it would run contrary to the mission that we've established. Another is related to that. That kind of goes to the Eagle Brook point that Tom made earlier. We don't have a desire to continue to add more and more and more people to our body, because that you get to a point and it's really difficult to know one another, and it's really difficult for leaders to know the people, and really difficult for the people to know the leaders. So we wouldn't have any interest, just as part of how we do things, of continuing to grow. So we wouldn't anticipate a building expansion here and another building expansion at a later time to try to accommodate additional growth. We do have plans and thoughts on how, if people continue to come, we're not going to say, no, you can't come, but we do have plans to deal with that, apart from adding a service and apart from growing bigger in that building. And so another point I would be very interested. It seems to me like, our building committee has done an excellent job in pulling together and working really collaboratively with the city. We've been very thankful for the support. But I think, we would be open, as we've talked about, to changing the footprint of the building and coming up with something that is more workable to the extent that this one isn't. It seems to me from all the conversations, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be a way to thread the needle on the space, the size of the building on the space of the lot. There'd be a way to deal with the requirements and accommodate some of the neighbors' concerns. So the building on the space seems like there might be some room, at least from the way I'm reading things. But the parking thing, it would be helpful to us to get some feedback on that parking question. We're at the early stages of talking with our congregation, and we need the more guidance that we can get from you all so that we can take those next steps would be greatly appreciated. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this, please?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm Stephanie Buss. Scott is my husband. We just purchased the house next door. So we haven't had a chance to live there yet. But I just wanted to clarify that a church doesn't have to be as large as an Eaglebrook church to completely change how the space is experienced. Doubling the size of the building next door to us is going to change how we experience that house, how we experience the neighborhood. And it's not something we even knew about when we bought the house. I guess I would just ask you, as you go forward, to just consider 20 feet instead of 10 feet. They want to come within 10 feet of the property line. Just consider what it would be like if you were living next door. That's all I'm asking. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that. I'm Bonnie's husband, Craig. I live at 2254 3rd Street, and I live next to these guys and live next to those guys. First of all, the church has been a good neighbor, I admit that, and we are pleased to see him there. My first reaction is the building is just flat out too big for the space. I mean, it just looks huge on that small footprint. And again, my wife pointed out that when we built our place 13 years ago, we had to do a lot to get that to fit into the space, fit into the property line. So I think everyone else should have to do the same thing. Mostly, I think when we were told that we couldn't do something that we wanted to do, it wasn't because we said we wouldn't do it in the future. The city said, well, what if you sell the house? What about those people who buy your house in the future? What are they going to do? So the church says, yes, we're not going to expand. We're not going to be Eagle Brook, and I respect that, and I like the church. But I don't know, in 10 years, they sell it to somebody else. What are they going to do? So we have to look at what they're going to do going down the road in the future. And I'd like to see something that would be more appropriate to the scale of the property. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Caleb Berge. I'm responsible for the plans, so I thought it just best to come up and share my thoughts and how we arrived at this this solution. You know, we were meeting as a church in the backyard of one of the elders' houses when we first formed, and were tickled pink that a building came available back in 2020. And, you know, I think everybody in the congregation kind of fell in love with the property, the place, the town, and you know, you can hear the emotion in the neighbors' voices as they talk about it, because I think it's just a beautiful place. But as we started to understand that we were growing, we felt very constrained by the existing building. You know, it's a 2-level. There's a sanctuary and there's a basement, and so, you know, we would meet and you know, have a soup Sunday, and right after the church was over, you know, half of the chairs were moved aside and tables were set up, and there were people downstairs and people upstairs, and there was really, I mean, nowhere to go. And so we started to cast a vision of what could this space look like, and what in an ideal world, what kind of space would we need to accommodate 300 people? And so the plans, you know, when we started to put pen to paper, it seemed to make sense that, you know, based on the roof line and, you know, consistent with, you know, trying to keep with the aesthetic of the residential area, that we could kind of match that, and started to pencil out the plan. It became very apparent, though, that there really is no expansion discussion without eliminating the parking lot. I mean, it is a small residential site. There are constraints inherent with that. And so when mapping out all of the setbacks and the constraints, we knew that parking was going to be a big ask. And so you can kind of see our on the screen our parking study of what it would take to accommodate 100 vehicles, utilizing some of the city infrastructure, as well as the on-street parking that we currently utilize. So without eliminating the parking lot, there really is no even discussion of building in general. And so that was kind of issue number one. Number two was impervious. And impervious, ironically enough, when we were studying that, the addition creates less impervious on the site by eliminating the parking lot just from the sheer size of the asphalt. So I realized that there's a different way to treat that. I mean, it is a different type of runoff than building runoff. Parking lot runoff, that is different than building. But when we're talking about impervious surface, what we're showing as being rather aggressive in trying to meet our needs, it actually decreases what is there currently in terms of impervious surface. Now, it is still above the requirement, but I just wanted to note that it is a reduction in impervious. The third point is the setback and the side yard setback. That one kind of came out in the 11th hour when we were talking to Jason and Ashton and Shay, and really fruitful conversations, and so I appreciate that. We overlooked the 20-foot, the doubling of the setback that was required based on the conditional use of the site. So in a traditional residential R4, we were going under the impression that the 10-foot setback was our constraint. I realized that the encroachment, given the church use, but it is a little bit, when trying to analyze a residential use versus a church use, and understanding how we went about treating that facade, it was very intentional to keep all fenestration away from the neighbor's property. So our effort was really to align with the public-facing streets and put a majority of our windows openings fronting those public ways, and really trying to keep the private aspect of the west facade, and intentionally so. Now, that does have the potential to create maybe more of a blank facade, and so I understand the concern. The images that we've produced are just that. They're just rough images. These are intents. These are our way of studying what the floor plan could be extrapolated three-dimensionally, but this is by no means a final design. And so I just wanted to be noted that this is really our attempt to understand the constraints, understand the kind of the problem facades, and try to address them and articulate them in such a way that is appropriate. And so if that condition, if the setback is the problem, and it sounds like has been verbalized that is not desirable, we can go back to the drawing board. It is, I just want to note it's rather difficult. We're only working with a small piece of property, so it is trying to accommodate kind of the use and trying to be, I guess, do it in a thoughtful way. There will still need to be some how do I articulate that? There will still need to be some, I guess, provisions or conditions that deviate from the zoning code, and that's why we were intent on seeking a PUD and trying to create a level of design, a level of articulation that could enhance the neighborhood. So I just wanted to kind of convey those thoughts and kind of tell you how we arrived at this solution. So, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue? All right. Well, thank you, everyone who did offer your comments. Mr. Boyer, first off, congratulations. If you're even entertaining a project like this, it means your congregation's growing and you have the financial wherewithal to take on a project like this. So That's something to be proud of. It's your success that is causing me the concern for what this will ultimately be, because it seems like the more successful it is, the bigger these issues, these legitimate concerns that folks are raising have. We're not making any official decisions tonight, but you invited our bluntness, which I think is exactly what this process is supposed to do, which is to have an early conversation before you have tens of thousands of dollars into due diligence and we're far enough along, and then suddenly the neighbors go, whoa, you've been planning this for 2 years? Where'd this come from? So that's why we're having this conversation. So I'm going to try and offer my bluntness, and we'll engage in a dialogue. I see two separate issues that on their own cause me a lot of concern, and then individually maybe we'd find a solution, but when you bring them together, as you said, it's a big ask. The building itself, some of you have talked about how you're going to take it seriously, it's going to look very nice, it'll be a good finished product. I have no doubt about that. It's not that you'll do a good job and do right by the facade and what it looks like. It's really, really big on a very small property in what is a quaint neighborhood, and I realize people have built larger houses recently, but I haven't seen many 7,000 square foot houses go up. The big ones are like 4,500. So this is, in and of itself, a big, big property, big structure on a small property. And I think it will fundamentally change the characteristic of the neighborhood. And some people might think that's a good thing and they want to see it expand. I don't. I like quaint downtown White Bear. That's what I grew up experiencing, and that's what I want to preserve. I also want to keep quaint churches in downtown White Bear because I see significant benefit to that too. So I don't know how we try and marry those two. I want to be blunt because I don't want to give you false hope and say, let's water down the project so much that you're basically putting a little bump out of 1,000 square feet, and that doesn't accomplish what your general congregational goals are. So that in and of itself, I have significant concerns about, and even if we go back and forth and play with it and scale it down to 1,500 square feet and we comply with the setbacks, we're still left with a situation where your congregation appears to be growing and successful, and that will cause more people to show up. And like any good church, rightfully so, you're not going to turn people away. The church that I go to, I would never want to see them say, well, we're at capacity. This isn't a country club where we cap the membership. We're going to keep as many people as we can coming. And that's how it should be. But that's the problem. So parking, I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking with other projects, whether they're business, whatever it might be, about parking because we take it seriously. It's one of those things that you can't just gloss right past because it's the day in and day out things that we have to deal with. Police have to deal with it. Neighbors have to deal with it. We have to enforce it. So to go to literally zero parking and just say, well, it's the street or it's city parking lots that are already an issue and get use, maybe not as much on Sunday mornings, but it still gets used. So, and that is a block away, and it's just not realistic to think when we're having weather like this, you just can tell your congregation, just go park in the lot 2 blocks away. So realistically, I think it's going to just continue to be an issue with parking. There's no way to solve that. You just don't have the space to say, well, we'll just put up a bigger lot over here. There's no more room left. So I don't see how the continued trajectory of what your congregation and church are doing works for this space. And I'm not trying to drive you out, but it seems like it's a decision that you folks need to make. What are our long-term goals, and is this lot, this location, what's right for us? And I don't like having to tell anybody that when you want to put money and invest in the community and do a good project, but the point of us having a zoning code and setbacks is to set the rules of the game. And the PUDs have a role, particularly when it comes to housing, which is a great need, but this is a little bit different. So I can't imagine being wild about this project and ever supporting it for those reasons that I've just laid out. That's not to say that there isn't a solution somehow. I don't see it, but I don't think this is it. That's where I stand today, based on everything I've heard. So, council, this is our opportunity to offer feedback.
Jason, could I ask you a couple questions about the things that don't fit? So we've been talking about the impervious situation. I had an impervious situation. Impervious situations suck. But on a residential lot, you can get an administrative variance. Is that what it's called? Through Connie, up to 50% with trenching, in my case, or rain gardens. I'm assuming this is not to the point where we've been talking about that at all. Can you do that on commercial lots?
Mayor, members of the city council, it's just slightly a different process in this case. What is assumed here is that the PUD would work with the applicant and their designers to maybe potentially allow additional coverage in exchange for something else, which could be similar to what residential homeowners have done, similar to your project, where you would provide some additional stormwater mitigation in some way. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And that's where I think where we would try to work with the applicant and their designers and consultants to come up with some suggestions that could generally meet the spirit and intent of the stormwater management issue, while allowing them some additional coverage.
So they could just trench the entire yard, capture all that water, and then not have a sloughing or rainwater issue, is basically what I'm thinking in my head.
Well, I'll be very frank. We haven't done that analysis,
Right.
but the general idea of what you're proposing, I would agree with, that there would be additional rain guarders, stormwater mitigation, stormwater ponding that maybe becomes more of a design feature on the site.
So when we talk about having a variance on this issue, we're not saying you don't have to deal with it. We're saying you're going to deal with it in these specific manners, and this will be dealt with.
Yes.
So we're not talking about just saying you were going to ignore it.
That would be staff's intention.
Right,
Yes.
okay. The 20-foot side yard setback, I'm looking at the plans, and I am just not an architect. Could they move the building bump out toward the street instead, or are they right up against the Stewart side setback?
Mayor, members of the council, I believe they're also up against the setback on the street side, the Stewart side. However, I think I would agree with what I think I've been hearing from the applicant is that they believe that there are ways they could redesign the site to lessen, if not meet, the setback requirement, if that's important to the council.
On the 20-foot side?
On the 20,
For the
yes.
neighbor. And then they'd be left with a building that is, what is the height of that wall on that side of the building for the neighbor? I mean, is that within code, or is that extra? Is that extra?
Mayor, members of the council, the building height meets the code requirements. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head
Okay.
what that specific height on that side of the building is. Generally, I think the measurement of the site, if we go back here to the notes, allowed height is 35 feet, which is a very standard height in the residential neighborhoods. The measurement to the peak, in this case, it looks like, is 32 feet. Just as a note, you may remember in your staff report, the spire is higher than that, existing, not proposed to be changed, and code allows those spire architectural features to be higher.
So it's within the residential height requirement. It doesn't have some kind of special requirement because it's quasi-commercial.
Mayor, members of the council, yes, it is
So if a
within the
person was
height.
going to build a house there, they could build it that tall?
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, and then we get to parking. And I can't remember, and I don't know that you were here, how many people could go into Lakeshore Theater and Lakeshore Players? And they had no parking lot. And they would meet Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday, all the time. Of course, they weren't really close to downtown, but I'm not saying that I would say, oh, you don't have a parking problem because somebody else did the exact same thing. They were there forever, but it did work. I guess I would say, I'm not exactly sure what I would say if a proposal came in that fit the 20-yard setback and had a lot of trees. 'Cause frankly, it's just kind of obnoxious to look at a 32-foot wall. But, again, my neighbor's probably got one, but trying to think if they do. I don't know if they do, though. But parking is going to be an issue, and can we put in the PUD, you have to have busing? Is that something you can do? Is that something the city can do?
So, Mayor, members of the city council, and the city attorney can also chime in at any point here. Generally, the PUD is designed to be a good faith effort on both part to come up with a better development. There's something in the code that is just as a sticking point, and to get a higher quality, better development for the community, you can do things a little bit differently. Certainly, different ways of bringing people to the site, I think, is generally your point here. That could be one of the conditions. That could be part of the exchange.
In theory. The only reason I mentioned the other ones is because you guys could design a plan that was 35 feet high, met the setback, and worked through the stormwater mitigation issues, and we would really not be able to say anything about it one way or the other. And so the bigger issue is, again, this parking. I guess I would encourage you, I don't know what anybody else would say. I don't know how this would go forward, but it sure would be a good faith effort going forward. If you did want to consider busing, that you started it before the project to show that that was something you were willing to do. If it's something you'd be willing to do, I don't know. Or that whatever you are planning to do to mitigate that you start it before the project. But again, that doesn't mean that that anybody or me wouldn't say is still not enough. But at least that would be one part of the conversation I would have. And again, I would just encourage you as you go forward with this, the plan to make it look as, I like trees, but as residential as possible, because they're going to be looking at it for a really long time. But that's my initial feedback.
Council, any other thoughts on this? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, a couple of positives. I really like hearing that the church is a good neighbor. The neighbors sort of keep saying that over and over. That's just really a good vibe, and that's a credit to the neighborhood and the church. I think this was said repeatedly. I also love all the comments about this new process. I think it's still a relatively new process we're doing with this planned review. So that's sort of kudos to staff and Jason in particular for shepherding that through. We're really hitting our groove, I think, with this process where we start early and there's just, it's a drawing, and we're getting some really initial feedback, and I think it's working. So a couple of positives. So it was addressed in the memo, or maybe it was addressed in the applicant's letter, that White Bear Lake is fully developed and there's just no other place to go. But have we really spent more time on that? That's my first thought, is like, it's a great use for the city. This lot is small. The parking's an issue. Have we really explored other spots in the city that this church could move to? I know that's asking a lot to say move, but it's a high-value lot in a great neighborhood. They obviously have some money to expand. So between selling the lot, maybe it's not completely unreasonable. And I just wonder if we have looked at properties that we control as a city. There's lots of open space in other churches. There's lots of open space in the school district. Just thinking outside the box early in the process, have we really considered that? And I just want to encourage that kind of activity, because I think it's a great use. And I don't want them to leave, and I don't want them to fail. But this is a difficult application, obviously. So I don't know if you have Mr. Lindahl has any comments on that, or if it's even our job necessarily. But I think it could be our job to at least help with the search or look at an inventory.
Mayor, members of the council, we haven't discussed specifically the property that the city owns, but we'd be happy to have that. The applicant really hasn't expressed a desire to consider other sites at this point, but certainly we'd be happy to have that conversation to the extent that the city owns any property that may be a good fit for them. But beyond that, really, we haven't, staff at least hasn't worked on behalf of the applicant in the private sector to help them find a site.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's necessarily our job, but it could be something we could do. Your team knows more about the property management and what's going on in the city than anybody in the city. So maybe we spend some time on that, not a lot of time because you guys are busy, but that was just one of my overriding thoughts is, well, how do we do this? Well, maybe this isn't the site, but keep them in White Bear Lake some other way. So that's just my initial reaction. The parking is a really big issue. To go, from already way over variance to zero. When I was reading the memo, I think, oh wow, okay, so we're going to put a lot of cars in the neighborhood. The map that we had up earlier with the yellow spots for cars is compelling. You got our city lot just a block away, full of cars, and certainly on Sundays, at least, that's not going to be a difficult thing to do. There's not going to be anybody else there in that spot. I would say in the busing, I thought of busing too, or a golf cart or things like that. But we have some experience with that in other properties in the city. In my neighborhood on the Boatworks over there with tallies, it didn't really work. It just didn't. They tried. It didn't really work. We had a lot, and we were going to bus everybody over, but there just wasn't compliance. Especially if there's just spots on the street to park, people are just going to do that. They're not going to go to the lot and get a ride from the golf cart or the bus. So, good idea. So. Those are my initial thoughts. Like I said, this is really early, and those are initial thoughts.
Any other thoughts from the council? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think there are worse problems for communities than growing congregations and community-based ministries. I applaud you for the work that your community is doing, the way that your congregation is working and acting. That's a tribute, and good things are happening. Whether this is the right place, I don't know. I'm going to push back on Mr. Cox's comment about it being a commercial building. I don't view it that way at all. This is not commerce. It doesn't have any of those same attributes in that regard. It's got to meet the code. So the issues that do concern me, 20-foot setback, I'm open to hearing about parking solutions. I'm not confident that there are any, but I'm open to listening to what that might look like. Again, I think Mr. Member Walsh is accurate, and the other experience that we had in trying to use that to alleviate parking issues was not successful. So don't know what to do with that. I would be curious, Mr. Lindahl. So roll this forward. If the congregation were to say, as opposed to framing it as what can we do with our ministry in this place, what can our ministry do in a well-resourced, different place, okay? And as Mr. Walsh mentions, it's property that has some value. What are the conditions on somebody else? So I'm thinking of the other neighbors. It's like you don't get to necessarily control what somebody else is going to do so long as they meet code, your side yards and height and so forth. In this situation, because of the previous CUPs and other things, what might be possible that would be within our code and could go on that lot as a successor? Can you speak in any kind of generalities about what that might look like?
Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, I just want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking in the context of assuming the site is as it is now, or assuming the site was
So if somebody wanted to come
redesigned as it
in
was, as
and
it's
live
proposed?
in the neighborhood, tear down the building and put up something really new and big for whatever that site might bear, what might that look like?
So, Mayor, members of the council, really under the current zoning, in the residential category that's allowed here.
R4?
It would, yes, it would be entitled to a single-family or two-family use. Okay? Under our current code, they could seek a conditional use permit to add an accessory dwelling unit. They, quite honestly, the most intense thing really in the residential zone that they're in would be a conditional use for a religious institution like they have. And then that's subject to the standards that we've kind of outlined in the staff report and discussed here a little bit tonight.
I guess my only point is that to think about this as a single turn of the screw, when in fact there's going to be more coming down the road if the congregation should move, it's like you have other issues to think about as well and compare which you might like better. But be clear-eyed about what might be able to be built there that you also might not like. Just, that's kind of the way some of the development happens, and that's okay. In general, I'm going to say, I think it's really hard to see this development on that site. But I remain open to listening and thinking. But nothing easy is coming to my mind. Congratulate you on the work that you are doing, and thank you for the work in our community.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment?
Please, but step up to the podium if you would.
Yeah. Thank you all. This is incredibly helpful in what we were aiming for. Can I just address a few of the comments you guys have made? Member Walsh, we've spent about 2 years looking at other places in the area. We love White Bear. We don't want to leave White Bear. We're very invested in White Bear, both the businesses and the people. So I've reached out to a handful of different churches that are seeing maybe attendance go in the opposite direction of us to see if potentially they'd be interested in trading. It'd make a lot of sense for some churches to have less overhead and less building to care for, but as of right now, there's no interest in that. We've had our eye at other creative opportunities. Actually, Member Joe Erickson, realtor, part of the building commission, we were working with her as about 2 years ago, so she can attest to that. And I love the idea of considering if there's other things that we are unable to see. We would be grateful for that. I think we're renting the Armory before there was a shift in things, which would have been a wonderful home. But yes. Thank you also for pointing out, Member Hughes, the use of the theater down the street. That's about 2 blocks away from where we are. You've got the theater down the street. You have another block away. I'm spacing on the what's the event center just downtown there? About 2. Yes. Understand that that's in downtown zoning. Again, it's a block away in terms of parking. So and then St. John of the Wilderness is in a similar situation to us of they don't have their own parking. They just happen to be connected to the city lot that's connected to the library. So they're in a unique spot. St. Mary's, I know, has a fairly large parking lot, but to my understanding, they're expanding, parking on the street, and it's neat. We're glad that that's there. It sounds like you guys are all aware. I don't have to pitch it to you to drive around the streets on a Sunday afternoon. They're delightfully quiet, and I think that there's clearly space there, and at the same time, I understand the tension you all are feeling. So thank you for the thoughts. Member Edberg, I do want to just address, to your point, someone could buy this space if we were to sell it and build a very large house, a very large multifamily unit. Could build a daycare facility that is used 5 to 7 days a week, and they would have different, lesser obstacles potentially than we would in doing that. So I appreciate you pointing that out. We're, even with this, trying to maintain one service, we're attempting to do a community good instead of being and taking up this space from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. every Sunday. Having that volume be much shorter is part of our goal here. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else have any final comments on that? A couple people haven't spoke. I want to make sure. Okay. All right. We're going to move on to item 8B, Police Sergeant Labor Agreement. Mr. Juba.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Staff and Law Enforcement Labor Services, who represents the police sergeants, have reached an agreement on a 2-year labor contract covering 2025 and 26. Highlights of that agreement include changes for wages, the 3% cost of living adjustment in 2025 on January 1, then also a step increase on January 1 for all 4 members, and then regular step increases then on their anniversary dates for the rest of 2025. And then 2026 would be another 3% cost of living adjustment on 1/1/26, and then just regular step increases on their anniversary dates. And then other highlights include same health insurance contribution that we've done for other groups for 2025. If you recall, that's the city picking up 90% of the health insurance premium increase for 2025, and then adding an additional $100 into the HSA contributions. Holiday hours increasing from 96 to 112. This was also included in the patrol contract that was approved at your last meeting, and it's also consistent with the non-bargaining staff at the city. Increase in uniform allowance from $950 to $1,000. That'll stand for both years of the contract. And then renewing the hiring and referral incentive, which was also included in the officer's contract, which was approved at the last meeting. So with that, staff recommends approval of the 2-year contract with LELS for our police sergeants. Just a note, if council were to approve that tonight, that will be our last open contract for 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Juba. I don't have any questions. Congratulations on reaching an agreement, and we'll see what the council would like to do. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the resolution and the approval of the contract. Just a question on holiday hours, and this was in the last one too, and I didn't ask it, and so now I'm seeing it twice, so I get another chance to ask it. Holiday hours increased from 96 to 112. So is my math right? 112 hours of holiday is 14 holidays, and so is the city recognizing 14 holidays? And I know city staff is not taking 14 holidays off all year, because we wouldn't even, I don't think we'd be able to function. So is it kind of a bank the holiday hours, use them as PTO, or how does that all work? Is my math right there?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Councilmember Walsh, so there's kind of a mix there. So for the patrol staff and for the sergeants, those officers are banked. They because of their schedules and how they work, they get that bank, and then they use those throughout the year on their own schedule.
That's my comment is that's a lot of holiday hours. I mean, I would say that's more than the private sector. And so this is one of these ideas where we're doing better here than we do in the private sector. I certainly don't have 14 holidays, paid holidays. That's 2 weeks, before you even get to vacation or any other kind of PTO. So, but like I said, I'm going to support the contract. I'm glad we're all done with the contracts, but that's a lot of holiday hours.
Any other thoughts from the council? Or I would entertain a motion to approve the labor agreement. Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That CBA is approved. Thank you again, Mr. Juba. All right. Item 9, discussion. White Bear Lake area North Campus neighborhood parking. Mr. Copy.
More parking.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Chief Hager and I are here tonight to give council an update on our review of the ongoing parking around the North Campus expansion area. Interesting in talking with the school district through the getting this item on the agenda. They are now trying to market, or at least make sure that we're calling it the White Bear Area High School. So just that was came out here in the last couple of days with talking with district staff. So we will try our best to, or I will try my best to keep it to that. May make some reference to North Campus just because we're all familiar with it. So. So what we want to do tonight is kind of go over our observations as we reviewed the area after school started, some draft recommendations and next steps that we would recommend taking. So if you recall, during the approval processes in 2021 and 2023 for the expansion project itself, as well as the stadium expansion, traffic studies and parking studies were reviewed. In general, the parking requirement, or the parking provided on site met or exceeded requirements within city code. And the only true parking recommendation that came out of either of those studies was to recommended restricting parking on the east side of Bald Eagle Avenue adjacent to the school. More so to help with some of the drop-off pickup issues that we had seen in the past. So if you recall, staff had recommended during those approval processes or review processes that we wait until campus is fully occupied and we see how things actually operate, including events, so that we can make a true recommendation of what we need for any further parking restrictions, what kind of issues that we see out in the neighborhoods, similar to what had been done at South Campus in the past. So just wanted to be consistent and make sure that we were kind of reviewing it holistically versus just taking one recommendation off of a parking study that's based on data, but still more theoretical. So really starting in the fall of 2024, once school started, and actually I think there was one event prior to there was one football game, I believe, that was prior to school opening, that engineering staff as well as police staff have monitored around the campus, the neighborhoods, police staffed the events, and looked at how things had operated. I'll go through some of what engineering had seen, and then I'll turn it over to Chief Hager, and he'll kind of summarize more of the what they saw from neighborhood parking as well as the event parking. So engineering tried to look at different times of the day, different days of the week, to really drive around and look at the how parking was handled, both on-site in the parking provided, as well as if there was any overflow into the neighborhoods. And really, we looked at mornings, afternoons, evenings as we were out and about doing our daily activities, really tried to document. We had a map and we documented what we saw, different vehicles that we saw consistently. And really the only issue that we really saw was 10th Street immediately west of Bald Eagle Avenue. So we consistently saw 5 to 15 cars that consistently parked along that roadway. We got a few calls from those residents in that immediate area of just inability to get out of their driveways. People would park pretty close to them, and that was kind of the school day. So, and then as staff were here on the weekends, and Chief Hager will expand on this a little more, but things got a little bit worse during, weekend tournaments, events, things like that. And then obviously the football games were a whole different type of event where it was a very large, the new stadium seats up to 5,000 people, a lot of people. A few different things that went on, weather related, whatnot, that didn't allow us to see full filling of the stadium, but still, I think got the general gist of what had happened. So I'll turn it over to Chief Hager, and you can kind of give your summary of what you'd seen out there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we noticed pockets of problems. We would field complaints from citizens now and again. Not as much as we had anticipated, I think, before this school year started. Most of those were just kind of growing pains. Just I'm not used to somebody parking in front of my house, and now there's somebody parking in front of my house, and it might just be one car. We didn't notice any real concentrated levels of parking, except for, like was mentioned, on 10th Street. And again, a couple handfuls of cars, but it was clear that they were just there, probably students during the day. As far as the events go, I attended the football games this fall, and just like the problems at the school, the small problems with parking at the school, they increasingly got worse with each game and with each week of school. The first few games of football, just maybe weren't that well attended, but when it came down to the last couple, there was quite a potential for a problem in that neighborhood just to the west off of Garden and 10th and Campbell in that area. We definitely saw, I drove around a lot that night, the last football game of the year. And, Garden was pretty packed on both sides, all the way, to the west from Bald Eagle. That could have potentially been a problem for us. And 10th was pretty busy, and it kind of wrapped into the neighborhood a little bit. The farther you got into the neighborhood, obviously the less, more sporadic the cars became. But that area could use some work for this upcoming year. I also am cognizant of the fact that, here we are in the middle of the school year, and there'll just be more and more cars as the school year goes on, because all of our sophomores will start getting their driver's license and whatnot, so we'll get more and more cars as we go on. But those are the problems that we saw from the police department side.
All right, thank you, Chief Hager. So next up, I want to run through a few things of what we currently have out there today. So if you look at the map here, I'm kind of in the immediate area on the east border of the White Bear Lake area, or White Bear Lake Area High School, is Division Avenue. Division Avenue is currently no parked on both sides, basically along the entire length of campus. Works very well. We don't see too many issues over there. We do have restrictions on 12th Street. Those restrictions were more timed restrictions with pickup and drop off with the old configuration of campus. If you recall, that is one street that we are working on with the 2025 street rehabilitation project. So once we finalize a design and bring back to council, we'll look at what that, but anticipate some type of parking or adding that parking restriction back in. Potentially to align more with what we'll propose as I get into that. But and then we also have no parking on the north side of 9th Street, and then we do have the west side of Central Avenue on the south side of campus that is also no parked. So that's currently out there, and we didn't see any issues with that as we drove around looking at the parking with the new campus configuration. So really going on with what Chief Hager and I had noticed, and our staff had noticed out there, is Garden Lane. I'll hit that first. We really need to do something out there. That was reconstructed in 2019, but due to right-of-way constraints, just how the area was platted and developed, the roadway ended up very narrow. It's 24 feet wide, curb and gutter. It worked okay when it was a sleepy little end of the basically the north side of town, not really a whole lot of traffic around it. It worked okay. There was a few people that parked on the streets. Now that campus is very close to it, especially during events, not only during the bigger football games and the stadium events, but the weekend tournaments, things like that, where a lot of that traffic is congregated on the Bald Eagle side. Have a tendency to have more and more parking that has migrated into that neighborhood. In addition, based on the review and looking at operations during some of the bigger events, as well as those weekend tournaments, things like that, Bald Eagle, initially some of the traffic studies recommended just no parking the east side, more so for traffic entering and exit the campus, try to prevent some of the stacking for pickup and drop off. But as we further reviewed it, we would recommend that the west side of Bald Eagle also be no parked or have those parking restrictions put in place. Reason being is it really pushes a lot of parking on that side, and you have people exiting vehicles just running across at random along that entire length, creating potential hazards with motorists coming down Bald Eagle. And not seeing people exiting between cars to try to cross the street. As we all know, it's people have a tendency not to, and especially with the no sidewalk on the west side, people aren't going to be walking down to the nearest intersection to cross just to go back. They're going to cross wherever they park. So that kind of brought to light that could be an issue if we only no park the east side. So that would be a recommendation for those two. In addition, similar to what we have at South Campus, we would recommend or at least entertain looking at permit parking in some of the adjacent neighborhoods to the high school. So looking at those areas there, that's what we would initially look at. We think it gets out far enough into the neighborhoods where, you know, the people will kind of stop. It's getting too far to walk. They're going to be forced to park back into the parking lots. So if you really look at the North Campus or the White Bear Lake Area High School, there's over twice as much parking provided on site than the existing South Campus. So that being said, there's over 1,300 stalls. A lot of what, like Chief Hager had mentioned, is people just figuring out where parking is, best ways to get in and out. It's still a new area. And even during some of those bigger events, people were parking in the neighborhood just because they thought it was closer than, you know, maybe driving over to Division to park in some of those parking lots over there. So it's just really education and getting people to park where they need to. We did meet with the school district before any of the games did start, and they tried to get out messages to visiting teams, their own parents, things like that, to let folks know where to park, which I think helped, but still we need more time to really educate people to, and maybe with some of the restrictions, force them to park in the parking lots. Sometimes people say, I can park right across the street. I can get out quicker than me getting stuck in a parking lot. So a lot of it is just training them to park where there's parking available. So that is something that we would, again, recommend that we entertain looking at a parking program. I'm not aware, from what I've heard is the permit parking works relatively well at South Campus, has over the years. I'll let Chief Hager comment if he's got any additional.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The permit parking, which we'll take away now because we don't have a problem in the South Campus anymore. But that seemed to work really well. Of course, I wasn't around for the implementation of it, but since for the last decade or so, it's alleviated any parkings in neighborhoods like that.
Just further comment on some of the implementation of these. One is I'll mention is Bald Eagle Avenue, north of 6th Street, or north of 9th Street is under county jurisdiction. We've had initial conversations with the county, and they were happy to entertain the city's recommendations based on council support to no park Bald Eagle along their jurisdiction. South of 9th Street is city jurisdiction, so we would have the right to do that. As far as the permit parking goes, as Chief Hager had mentioned, we would, the district has asked us as well as to remove those permit parking area at South Campus as they're no longer needed. It is within city ordinance, so we would need to do an ordinance revision to do that. Staff would also look at, work with the city attorney to look at easier ways to make changes to that as we move forward to make sure that if we do need to make adjustments in the future, may or may not need ordinance revisions, but we will work with the city attorney to try to make that as seamless as possible to react as we may need to make changes once it's initially implemented. I did have conversations with the school district. They're generally supportive of our recommendations and our findings and have had similar concerns. So they are on board with what we have proposed, with the exception of calling it White Bear Lake Area High School. I'm just trying to repeat that so we all remember to say it. As far as next steps go, similar to what we had done early last year when we looked at the Ward 2 parking, is we really feel it beneficial to reach out to the neighborhood. Kind of go to the next slide here, but we took a look at the area around the campus and kind of that broad area that might be affected by the parking for events, as well as the general operations of the campus. And we would recommend sending a letter soliciting public comment so staff can further review that so that we can either confirm or possibly refine our recommendations before we bring it back to council for consideration. So I guess our ask tonight is that we would look for council direction to direct staff to send that correspondence out, review the data, and then bring that back for further consideration at a future date. Happy to answer any questions.
So a question regarding the permit parking. How does that relate to the residents that live right there? Is it bracketed hours of the day? Provide some color on that.
It's very detailed within the ordinance. Chief Hager is probably more versed at the issuance of those permits and enforcement, but.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yeah, the permits are free to residents there, and they're allowed to park on the city streets, and that's about it. It's not that challenging to do, but you have to be a resident to have a permit to park on those streets.
Mayor, members of the council, one thing I will add to that is currently South Campus have restrictions that are generally follow the school year and school day. We may have to look at different timing of permit parking in this area, just due to the volume of bigger events, weekend events, like we said, we don't see the school day parking being a huge issue other than 10th Street, but it really falls into more so opposite of South Campus, that it's really the weekend and event parking that causes the issues in this neighborhood. So we may look at different restrictions. It might be 24/7, 365 days a year that those restrictions are in place. Like Chief Hager said, the residents at free of charge would be issued those parking passes for their personal or guest vehicles.
Okay. Well, for purposes of tonight, general feedback is, yeah, I want to hear from all the people that have to live and deal with this. If for no other reason, maybe we're missing something. Yep. This strikes me as, because this is all brand new, the super high school on the north side, kids are going to find ways around. So it's going to be a little bit of whack-a-mole, I would imagine, for a period of time. But the best people that are going to give us the intel are, not that the city staff hasn't done a good job, but you're not there every day. So I'm all for that. And I want to invite the public to weigh in, good, bad, or otherwise, and let us know if you've got problems. That'll help define where we want to put this. So, Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cowpey, so I like the idea of free permit parking available for residents, because the biggest impact of the external impact is on residents. I'd be particularly curious to see if the folks who live on Bald Eagle might also desire to, if the people on Bald Eagle might also prefer to have access to permit parking for their guests and others who are coming to visit. I know there might be some issues about, so how do you tell on a Friday night who's got a permit and who's not? But inconveniencing all of the homeowners on both sides of that street deserves some thought. The 12th Street, Garden Lane, et cetera, that makes perfect sense to me. So I would support soliciting that input. But as I say, I would be listening for what do residents on Bald Eagle have to say.
Councilmember Hughes.
You know, there's that little tennis court there or the little parking lot there by the tennis court. Does the school own that, or is the county, or how does that work? Like, will they stripe that? Will that be no park? What is gonna happen with those 5 precious spots?
Members of the council, that is actually parking that just kind of appeared over time within county right-of-way. So that's kind of just occurred. We've allowed it. It's not, it's within the right-of-way. It's not inside no parking, so it's allowed. I'm sure, through use of the old tennis courts, it just kind of became under these restrictions that would be removed, whether it be, again, it's, especially during events, people, it's 90-degree parking, or even if you went angle parking, whatever, it's still dangerous for people to back out into traffic out on Bald Eagle Avenue. So under this proposal, we would remove that parking or work with the county to have that parking removed, solder, grass that area, kind of restore it. So that would be the proposal under our recommendations.
I don't know if it's worth making that clear, but I think you might want to, because
Yep.
it is used a lot on the weekend. And is there anything we can do on the intersections there at 6th and 9th to really call out pedestrians walking? I mean, especially at 6th. I can't tell you how many times I've driven by there and watched a kid run dart or stop and wait and not have someone stop for them in the intersection. And that's, it's after school, kids walking home from school, but 9th especially is terrible, but both of them are really terrible. So I don't know, can we black out there or white out the entire, I don't know. I would love to see something there that would actually cause people to think that there are kids walking across that intersection.
Mayor, members of the council, we are also, aside from parking, we're looking or continue to look at other pedestrian or vehicle improvements that might be made in the area. The focus tonight was to really look at the parking, but we are on a side note looking at some of those. 9th Street, we will have to work with Ramsey County to look at some of that. Also started some of those discussions as well. Again, south on 6th Street, we'll take a look at that as well. As far as, again, calling out above and beyond ordinary, I actually just at a conference here over the winter, and there's some pretty tight restrictions on what you can do within intersections and marking on pavements outside of what some of the current regulations are. There's some movement to that the state is looking at, so not that we can do anything today, like you said, to paint the whole intersection, but there is some movement in the desire to do that. So it's growing a little bit of legs in the design world. So in the future, that might be an option. But for now, we'll look at what is currently available to us.
I think not having parking on both sides of that street will definitely help see people on the sidewalk.
Can I add on to Councilmember Hughes, your comments? Mr. Copy, I should have asked you this when I was reviewing the packet, so I apologize. But could stop signs be considered at 9th for that exact reason? I think it's all painted crosswalks on all ways, I think, there. But I take this every day, 9th, and I see people flying through. And so could that be a way to slow them down going north and south direction? You already have one on 9th, but would that help?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, obviously, just to make it clear to everybody, Bald Eagle as well as 9th Street that is under county jurisdiction, so something that we can definitely bring up to the county to see if they would entertain it. Typically, you look at traffic standards. Typically, T intersections are not three-way or all-way stopped. Not that there's acceptance to every rule, but I will definitely have conversations with the county's traffic engineer and see what their thoughts are on potentially doing that.
Any other feedback from the council? Okay, well, sounds like we want to hear from the residents, and we're generally receptive to staff's recommendations that are the experts on all things parking and traffic flow and all that. So thank you. All right. Item 10, communication from the city manager. Ms. Crawford, do you have anything?
I do, just a couple of things tonight. It is winter, it's freezing out, but some reminders during a snowstorm. We kind of post this throughout the year on our social media, but please help Public Works and not park on the streets. It creates for a better opportunity for us to plow better, which then when it refreezes, doesn't create a bunch of muck in the streets. The police department is very happy to write tickets. I actually received a couple text messages from some residents saying, thank you for giving my kid a ticket. Really, thank you. So they are out there and they will enforce our ordinance. So just a reminder on those things as we are in the middle of winter now. Secondly, our body-worn camera program was audited recently. We're required to have that audited every 2 years. I did send the council notice on this, but just thought I would mention it, that we did pass our body-worn camera audit, and no issues or concerns, and the staff who are in charge of our body-worn camera program at the police department did a phenomenal job. So thank you to all of them and to Chief Hager for that. And then lastly, the city council and department heads have a work session next Tuesday, which we will do an annual check-in on our strategic plan and see if we're heading in the right direction on that, as well as talk about some street projects. So that's what I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Any questions for the city manager?
Jared.
Sorry, Councilmember Walsh, we have some business to attend to. No.
Good try.
Tell you what, I'm gonna run the meeting now, so everybody sit quiet. Item 11, closed session. For those in the audience, this is the rare time where we continue to do business, but outside of the earshot of the public for certain things. So with that, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session to evaluate the performance of the city manager as permitted by Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3A.
So moved.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're entering into closed session to evaluate. This meeting will not be video recorded.